Well, good evening, Senator Blumenthal. I'm delighted you're able to spend a few minutes with us this evening. Thank you for being in Eastern Connecticut. You're a big visitor to Eastern Connecticut. We're very pleased with that.
I love Eastern Connecticut.
Yeah,
I really
great.
do.
So we have about 10 minutes. We want to chat about a few of the issues that you're dealing with, and I might add dealing quite effectively with. Let's start with Planned Parenthood. I know you've been vocal on what's going on there, and I'm sure our viewers would be interested in your point of view.
My point of view is that Planned Parenthood is really a women's health issue, because most of what Planned Parenthood does is to provide health care to women, preventive health care like mammograms and cancer screening, other kinds of testing for sexually transmitted diseases, prenatal care, and education about how to prevent unwanted pregnancy. And there's common ground here for all of us, because women's health care is so important, and so many of the women who use Planned Parenthood really have no alternative. So that's why I have opposed strongly and steadfastly any effort to defund Planned Parenthood. And I think that's going to continue to be an issue that will be raised by the other side.
The other side, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of opposition to everything that President Obama proposes, and Planned Parenthood being one of them. Do we see anything going to happen in the next few, months? I mean, are people going to be able to get together as soon as the Republicans have their House Speaker selected, or what do you see happening there?
Every day I come to work, Tony, trying to reach across the aisle and resolve bipartisan solutions. And just earlier this week, I introduced a measure with a colleague, a Republican colleague, a very conservative Republican colleague from Iowa.
Grassley?
Chuck Grassley, who is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I serve on the Judiciary Committee, as well as Armed Services and Veterans Affairs. And he and I want to make sure there is disclosure of any improper payments to medical care providers. Put aside the issue, the fact we're working on a measure together, I think is very important, and that's what we need to do more and more, particularly when it comes to jobs and economic progress. So I hope, Tony, that there will be more bipartisanship, that we can break the dysfunction and paralysis that I see, and that we will adopt a budget, do a transportation bill, reauthorize the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. We've got real work to do, and holding hostage Planned Parenthood for a budget makes no sense to me. Holding any measure hostage, compromise is not a four-letter word. And we ought to be willing to come together and try to resolve some of these differences.
Well, that's good to hear. Let's talk about Volkswagen a little bit. People I speak with are highly annoyed, especially if they own a Volkswagen. And I know you have a strong point of view on this, and it seems like it's a very disgraceful issue insofar as the company is concerned, and their behavior here. What are your thoughts on that?
The company has acknowledged that it lied to its customers, it deceived and defrauded them, because it promised fuel economy, emissions levels that in fact it achieved only by cheating on the emissions tests. It had two settings of software. Volkswagen used to make Beetles, now it makes software bugs. And that practice involved also lying to federal authorities, our own EPA, which is a federal crime. Deceiving the federal government purposely and willfully is a violation of federal law, federal criminal law. So I've asked there to be a federal criminal investigation by the Department of Justice. I've asked that the Environmental Protection Agency require Volkswagen to pay a $18 billion fine, the maximum fine, $37,500 per car, and that there be money paid back to those consumers. In fact, I want Volkswagen to offer to buy back every one of those cars. Give those consumers the full value of their car, because what they've lost is the resale value of that car.
Exactly.
They've also lost the fuel economy that they thought they
Right.
were getting. They've lost their trust in the company and the environmental benefits they thought they were getting. So Volkswagen should be paying those consumers, owners of those cars, or buying back those cars. And I think there's a need to hold accountable individuals
Yeah.
at Volkswagen.
Well, isn't that the key? I mean, making sure the people who make these decisions actually spend some time behind bars. I mean, companies can afford to pay their fines, but unless there's some personal penalty connected with all of this, I mean, it seems to me that's really important. I'm glad to hear you say that.
And that's absolutely right, Tony. As a prosecutor, you know, I was the federal prosecutor, United States Attorney in Connecticut for 4.5 years, and I was State Attorney General for 20 years. My life has been about law enforcement, and we all know from our everyday experience that what really prevents people from committing crimes is the deterrence. What prevents them from deceiving and defrauding consumers is the penalties that deter them from doing it. Mm-hmm. And it's a small minority of business people who are
Sure.
involved in these kinds of practices,
Right.
just like it's a small percentage of our population that's involved in any crime.
Right.
But to deter anybody who thinks about crossing the line, there have to be individuals held accountable, and that's the key, as you say.
Yeah. And I think that would send a strong message for anyone in the future, whether it's in the automobile business or otherwise. Let's talk a little bit about rail upgrades. I know you've been working hard on and that, you know, good, well-serviced rail lines are important to our economy, and we've ignored them for so long. So can you give us a little bit of an update on your thoughts there?
One of my proudest and I think most important accomplishments is making sure that Eastern Connecticut receives the resources it needs to upgrade rail here. So the north central, northeastern line that goes from New London all the way up Eastern Connecticut, mm-hmm. uniting an educational corridor, Connecticut College, the Coast Guard Academy, with the community colleges along the line going up, and then Eastern Connecticut, the branch of our Connecticut college system. That educational corridor is very important, but also the economic effects of linking freight, enabling more businesses to ship through Eastern Connecticut up into Massachusetts, I think is very important. So rail offers tremendous opportunities, and that's why the Tiger Grant that we obtained, not just myself, but the whole delegation worked on it. Joe Courtney was instrumental, and my colleague Chris Murphy, all of us worked as a team. Rail offers enormous potential to get cars off the road and eliminate that congestion, environmental pollution, better transportation, cheaper mm-hmm. transportation. So I want our rail to be safer and reliable, not only in Eastern Connecticut, but also linking Eastern Connecticut by Amtrak to the rest of the Eastern Seaboard and the Eastern Corridor, Northeast and New England. So rail is what connects this nation. It has for decades, in fact centuries, and I think we need to invest in it being safe and reliable. Our tracks, other equipment, as well as positive train control, the system that will stop trains if they're going to collide or slow them down if they're going too fast. These kinds of technologies, I think, offer enormous promise.
So, Senator, you've done an enormous amount of work for our veterans over the years. And obviously, we're still struggling with a lot of veterans coming home, either psychologically or physically injured. And what are your thoughts on all of it? Obviously, it's I know you have a son, I believe, in Afghanistan, I think, is it? Or?
One of my sons served in the Marine Corps Reserve in Afghanistan. Uh-huh. Another is now in the Navy. Uh-huh. So I see this issue through their eyes, My son, who was in Afghanistan, is now out of the service, so he's a veteran. And I served in the Marine Corps Reserve. I feel very strongly and passionately that this nation needs to do more for its veterans, for all its veterans, of all wars.
Mm-hmm.
The invisible wounds of war, post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain
Right.
injury, plague anywhere from a third to a half of veterans coming home from these wars, as they have through the centuries, all of our veterans, whether it's Vietnam or Korea. And we're only beginning now to discover some of the means of treating them. I joined with John McCain in spearheading the Clay Hunt Veteran Suicide Prevention Bill. 22 veterans every day in this country take their own lives. Think of it, 22 veterans every day commit suicide. And this bill, passed by the Senate and by the House and signed by the President, will provide more medical care, more mental health care for those veterans, more outreach, more community support, and more research to uncover the causes and develop treatments for post-traumatic stress. I went to the White House for the signing of that bill. When the President of the United States signed the bill, I stood next to John McCain,
Mm-hmm.
Republican of Arizona,
Yep.
and Clay Hunt's mom. Clay Hunt was a Marine who came back from Afghanistan and took his own life, just as Justin Eldridge did here in southeastern Connecticut,
Mm-hmm.
in this community. And Joanna Eldridge, his widow, was there in the East Room when that bill was signed. That
Well-
was a proud moment for me, but we need to do so much more, Tony. This
Yeah.
is just a start.
Well, I think it's, and I know you've been engaged in this issue back when you were Attorney General, so this is a long-term interest, and I know that especially Eastern Connecticut, where we have a lot of veterans, really appreciate your work and your attention to their concerns, so it's much, much appreciated.
Well, thank you. Nothing is more important than keeping faith with our veterans on employment, on health care, job opportunities, skill training, critically important.
Well, look, folks, we've run out of time. First of all, I'd like to thank Senator Blumenthal for joining us this evening in Eastern Connecticut. He's a frequent visitor to Eastern Connecticut. We're here today to do a ribbon cutting with Atlantic Broadband and a company that's taken over MetroCast here in Waterford, Connecticut. And we're looking forward to working with the company. And Senator, thank you for being here and for doing the great work you're doing in Washington.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Thank you.